My name is Chanel Peterson. I'm the Managing Director for Marketing and Vision 2040 for the Economic Development Authority in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I'm excited today for everybody joining us at our Wednesday webinars. And this Wednesday, we are partnering with several business and disability partners here in the territory for the Using Science to Improve Your Bottom Line. So I'd like to give our partners each an opportunity to introduce themselves and welcome you as well to this webinar. Ms. Carr?
Hi, good evening and good day, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining today. Thank you, Chanel, for hosting. My name is Shami Carr. I'm an advocate at the Disability Rights Center. This is such a great opportunity to bring disability information to employers. And again, this is a partnership that we started over 18 months ago with SBDC and EDA. And VIU said join afterwards, and we are just so grateful to have the strength of this partnership to be able to provide this information and get entree to be able to talk to you as the employer. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you, Shami. Ms. Williams?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Jo Williams. I'm one of the business advisors at the Small Business Development Center, and we are happy to be a part of this webinar presentation. And I want you guys to know that the Virgin Islands Small Business Development Center is here to assist you with your business from inception of the idea all the way up to your exit strategy. We service the whole territory and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. And so we have a plethora of wealth and information. So before I go ahead and introduce our main presenter, Dr. Kimberly Mills, just a couple bit of housekeeping. Dr. Mills will be taking questions throughout the entire session. So if you are joining from Facebook or you're joining here on Zoom, please drop the questions in, raise your hand, shout it out. Okay, maybe don't shout it out, but raise your hand and we will definitely allow you the opportunity to ask your questions. And then again, for those who are joining us from Facebook, feel free to drop the questions or comments in the comment section because we're actively checking there as well. And Dr. Mills is ready to answer your questions. So without further ado, Dr. Kimberly R. Mills.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Just give a little thumbs up if your camera's on. Awesome, thanks. All right, I'm Kimberly Mills, the Executive Director of the Virgin Islands USAID, one of 67 disability centers of excellence that are located throughout the United States and in all of the territories and minor outlying islands. And I'm so grateful to be here tonight with our partners to share this information. You'll notice after my name, I have some letters. Let's say 5 of those are BCBAD, and those letters stand for Board Certified Behavioral Analyst with a doctoral certification, which means that I guess I know a little bit about behavior analysis, which I am absolutely thrilled to share with you guys tonight. This presentation is called Growing Your Bottom Line Using Science. And the science we're going to talk about tonight is something called applied behavior analysis, also known as ABA. So just a couple sort of scientific definitions about ABA, but we're really going to keep this presentation hopefully very lay oriented and participatory so that everyone can get involved and this information can be shared. Applied behavior analysis, it's important to know that it is a science, and it's a science based on changing behaviors by manipulating environmental variables. Alberto and Troutman said very simply about it, systematic application of behavioral principles to change socially significant behavior to a meaningful degree. When I really think about it in its simplicity, it's really can be simply understood as changing things in the environment so that we can encourage people, including ourselves and our lovely pets, to do the good things we want them to do. And how do we do that? We use tried and true scientific principles. So how will this directly benefit you? Like, why are we talking about ABA with SBDC and what does this have to do with business? Well, quite simply, in any business environment, there are desired outcomes. And those desired outcomes are implemented by people. implemented by employees, implemented by support staff, implemented by customers, implemented by business partners. And all of these various characters are basically doing things. They're performing actions and outcomes that either lead to the desired outcomes, or they're performing actions that lead to undesired outcomes. So what I really want you guys to focus on as we go through this presentation are, who are the actors in my environment? When I say actors, I don't mean like, of course, Tom Cruise and things like that, but the people, the players. So who are the players in my environment that impact my bottom line? And what are the desired behaviors that will increase my bottom line? So what are the behaviors that I need to see from my employees? What are the behaviors that I need to see from my clients? What are the behaviors I need to see from my customers? What are the behaviors I need to see from my support staff? What are the behaviors I need to see from my business partners? What are the behaviors I need to see from my community? And we're just going to really talk about the science as to how we make this happen. Now, I don't know if there's any Stephen King fans in this audience, but I used to love Stephen King. I read a lot of his books growing up, and one of his very popular books was called The Stand. And there's this one sort of interesting part in it where the hero, the protagonist is, having his moment of doubt, and he's talking with this older woman, and she's like, God has a purpose for you and something. And he says, well, I don't believe in God. And she says, well, that's okay, Nick, because God believes in you. And the reason I'm sort of sharing that funny thing, I thought about that line in the Stephen King's book when I was making this presentation, because the one thing I can tell you from the outset is that whether or not you believe in these behavioral principles, not only do these principles believe in you, but these principles are all around you. Everything going on around you is operating based on these principles, which I will share and talk about. And again, if there's any questions, I do prefer to be interrupted because I'd love to answer your question in the moment. And if it is that I cannot answer it right in the moment, then I'll just tell you, but I do want you to bring it up as we're going through content so that you can get your answer as quickly as possible to help with your understanding. All right, so who uses ABA? Special educators, animal trainers, as I've mentioned, SeaWorld, military strategists, organizational behavior change consultants, criminal profilers, city planners, salespeople, and all people. When I mentioned that this is a science, I thought it just important to clarify some of the basic ideas sort of that underpin and lay the groundwork for what is really considered a science, what makes something a science. And so one of the first things I'll mention is that these are basically scientific attitudes, things that underpin science. And one of the principles is something called determinism, which we said the universe is lawful and systematic. Things are not happening randomly. There's a reason. And we understanding that things happen for a reason, that helps us sort of get to the nitty-gritty of why things are occurring. One of the scientific principles is empiricism, which means that we're objectively observing what we see. We're not putting any judgment or subjectivity on it. We're just, okay, this is how it is. This is what I see. And then, of course, we experiment. That's really how we know what's what. We have to subject it to experimentation. If we get a certain result, we replicate it. One of our principles is parsimony, which means we rule out simple explanations first. And then the next principle, philosophic doubt, the sixth principle, which means we're constantly in a state of questioning what we thought we knew. And those are principles that underpin. All right, so now we're kind of getting into the meat of things a little bit. Applied behavior analysis. Maybe you're like, I don't know what ABA is, or I've never heard of ABA, but surely you've heard of Pavlov. And ABA sort of has its roots a little bit in Pavlovs. So just quickly to reflect back a little bit. In the early 1900s, psychology, it was dominated with states of being. I'm sorry, I mentioned Pavlov too early. Mentalism, which is really Freud, Descartes, and Piaget. the inner world. Why did the chicken cross the road? You know, tell me about your father. You know, things like this. You know, you sort of see the person laying on the psychologist's couch. But then when behaviorism came in, it really sort of took a little bit of an opposite twist on things. It was like, well, yes, maybe these sort of inner states are important, but maybe what's more important is like what a person is actually doing versus what they're thinking. So behaviorism really looks at observable behaviors versus what we call hidden behaviors or private behaviors. The chicken crossed the road, and what happens next will determine whether the chicken crosses the road again. And so that is really kind of how we got into this area of behaviorism, which of course then did start with Pavlov, and everybody sort of remembers very well the story of Pavlovs Bell with the salivation and the pairing of the salivation with the dog. So as a little reminder, Pavlov studied something which we call respondent behavior. And this background is really important because respondent behaviors are basically behaviors that we don't have control over. They're reflexes. If somebody you have dust in your nose, you sneeze. You know, they put that little puff of air in your eye, you blink, you know, when you're getting your eyes tested. The doctor hits your knee with a little thing, you kick. You don't really have a choice about those behaviors. Those are what we call reflexes. What Pavlov discovered is that we can actually create a reflex by something called pairing. And, you know, which is a little scary, but it does have to do with the topic tonight, how to increase your bottom line. We're going to sort of talk about how these principles of respondent behavior and behaviorism are used basically all around you, everywhere, in advertising, marketing, etc., to sell you products, to, you know, things like this. So it's important that we just have this little bit of refresher as to sort of where all these things are coming from. So when we're talking about the SR model, we're talking about a stimulus and a response. And what Pavlov basically figured out is that, whenever we bring in food, the dog starts salivating. What he did was he said, I wonder, you know, if I pair this food with a bell, over time, maybe I can actually make the dog start salivating just by ringing the bell. And when you think about it, it's really weird because he's taking a biological response that we were born with and making the stimulus that triggers it something totally unrelated. Well, it's important when we think about products and services, and as we sort of go through, you're gonna be like, oh, okay, so that's why I always go through the drive-through when I see those red and yellow colors. All right. Again, holler if you have any questions. We're going to continue. So Skinner basically sort of took it to the next level. He says, well, yeah, reflex is important, and, you know, things our body does naturally and things that we can, you know, sort of make the body do by pairing it. But what about things that are what he calls voluntary? And that's when we really talk about operant behaviors. And as business owners and people in the environment, that's really what you're concerned about. You know, you don't want to make your employees into slaves where, you know, you're ringing bells and they're doing things against their will because it's been conditioned. You want to encourage the good behaviors from an operant or voluntary perspective, meaning that there's a choice. And so a behavior analysis really has to do with this choice, operant behavior, not so much in reflexive behaviors, but we're going to talk a little bit more about reflexive behaviors. Any questions so far? All right.
Yes, there actually is a question in the chat.
Okay.
Someone has asked, is there any certificate after this session?
Very important. You know what? It's such a good question. And your behavior is a perfect example of something we're going to talk about later, which is a cue, a craving, a response, and a reward. And I don't know if there will be a certificate, but Chanel, can you answer that?
I can answer, and the answer is not for this particular webinar, no.
Okay, but
Yeah.
we can, contact me and we'll see what we can do if you need some sort of CEUs or something like that. But great, perfect perfect. I mean, what a beautifully perfect and perfectly timed unsolicited behavior to speak about what we're talking about, the reward. It couldn't have been better, but let me bring it up again. I appreciate you so much. Okay, so operant behavior, the voluntary behaviors, things that we choose. And operant behaviors really come about, we see here in this picture A, B, C. The A is for the antecedent, the B is for the behavior, and the C is for the consequence. So the consequence for engaging in the behavior of participating in this training is the C, the consequence, which is ideally a certificate. It may be that we have violated some of the behavioral principles we're talking about by not offering certificates, and this is great feedback because it may be that we will get more attendees if we do offer certificates. And we will absolutely talk about that because that's one of the principles that we're going to be dealing with, the importance of rewards and rewards that are valuable. So behavior, it's the activity of a living organism. Human behaviors include anything that a person does. Behaviors can be performed by any living organism. Okay. Now, humans, we're so complex, animals are complex, but one of the things I can tell you for sure, like I quoted the stand, whether or not you believe in these principles are operating. And pretty much every single thing in the human repertoire of behavior, everything that we do as humans, is a function of one or a combination of these 4 functions. It's really hard to somehow see and believe that everything we do as humans somehow comes down to one of these 4 basic motivations, but it's really the truth. One of them is socially mediated positive reinforcement, which is sort of a fancy way of saying attention. I wanted attention, you wanted attention, she wanted attention, he wanted attention. To get something, access to tangible items, to avoid something unpleasant we wish to escape or avoid. And then there's a 4th function, automatic reinforcement, which means simply the moment I do it, I get reinforced. I just scratched my nose. That was an automatically reinforced behavior. I didn't do it because I was looking for your attention. I didn't do it because I was trying to get something. I didn't do it because I was trying to avoid something. I did it because the moment I did it, it brought me a sense of relief or reward. Okay. So there's a number of different ways we go about getting the information for an FBA. But when we talk about wanting to change socially significant behaviors, this is a little bit tricky because socially significant behaviors as determined by who? Well, generally behaviors that are important to the client, the family, the organization, the community, or the world. If we are sort of looking at what's going on now with Ukraine, and we sort of see this global rallying to really change Putin's behavior, it's because the world community has determined that, yes, his behaviors are really socially significant. But social significance really is determined by who is asking. Sometimes when you're working with students or an employee, maybe what's important to the employee is not important to the boss. Conversely, what's important to the boss might not be important to the employee. So it's important to understand and get on the same page about what are the critical socially significant behaviors so that the team can work toward a common goal. All right, now the nitty-gritty, target behaviors. In ABA, when we are looking to change behaviors of our customers, behaviors of our employees, behaviors of ourselves, behaviors of our pets, it's really about target behaviors, or what we call BOIs, which are behaviors of interest. I want people to come to my store more often. I want employees to come to work on time more often. So whatever the behaviors are, that's what we're talking about. So let's just have a quick little quiz. Maybe you guys can unmute your microphones for a little bit. You don't have to turn your cameras on. Just a little quiz. I'm going to ask you if it is a behavior. So if one or a few of you can unmute your mics. Is biting an apple a behavior? I'm sorry.
No?
No.
Okay, I heard one no and I heard one yes. Okay, the answer is yes.
Yes.
It is a behavior, because a behavior is anything that a person does and it functions to do something and it affects the environment. So biting an apple is a behavior. What about walking a mile?
Yes.
Yes.
It's a behavior. Talking?
Definitely.
Okay. Reading?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. What about a robot moving its arm?
Not a behavior.
No.
It's not a behavior. Why?
Because it's not a person.
Because it's not a living organism. You got it. Telephone ringing?
No.
No.
Not a behavior. Picking up a cell phone?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep, picking up a cell phone is a behavior. I've done it. It functions to do something. There was a change in the environment. A dog licking its paws.
Yes.
Yes.
It's a behavior. Yep, a dog licking its paws is a behavior. It's done by a living organism and it functions to do something. Thinking.
Yes.
Yes.
This one is really tricky. Thinking is a behavior. Now, think about, with applied behavior analysis, what did we really say about behaviors? We have to be able to what them?
See them?
We've got to be able to observe them. So because thinking is something we can't observe, we would say it's not a behavior, because we have to be able to observe it so we can know, like, is it changing? Because with ABA, we're trying to change behavior. So because we can't observe somebody thinking, now, if we had very high-tech scientific equipment and we could actually register the electrical changes in the brain when thinking is occurring, yes, then we could definitely say, but because we can't observe it right now, we would say, no, it's not a behavior. But great work with that exercise. Okay, again, determining socially significant behaviors, we just surveyed a number of different people. All right, so we've got a whole bunch of stuff we have to change. How do we know where to start? Well, it's basically like a hospital emergency room. We do a triage. We say, okay, here's what we got. Here's what we're looking at. So if you guys were sort of looking at this list of behaviors, where would you start in terms of saying, okay, which of these behaviors is most socially significant? So let's just have a talk.
The excessive.
Assaultive.
Oh.
Okay.
I think you're going to say the same thing.
Assaultive behaviors, for sure.
Okay. All right, so the group kind of have a consensus, definitely, that the assaultive behaviors. So why do you think that that's the most socially significant?
Because other people could get hurt.
Yes.
And
And
it's so acceptable.
yep, I would have to agree that, yes, if I were sort of coming into an environment and saying, okay, this is kind of what we've got here, yes, I would probably definitely start with that. Who thinks it's important that somebody curses a lot at work?
I think that one's pretty significant as well.
I do too.
All right, what about an employee talking to themselves?
I would say,
Read it out loud.
Yeah.
yeah, I would say it's unless it's to a level where it's becoming disruptive to the business, to the other employees and the
Yep.
customer.
Yeah.
It would be definitely lower on the scale or on the spectrum.
Yeah, and so you guys are doing such good work because you're really asking the right questions. In behavior, see, by the way, there is no right or wrong with this. Because yes, we all agreed like assaultive behaviors is pretty important, but what if it only happens like once every 5 years? I'm just saying. And what if, you know, the coming to work on time, literally every single day the person is late? So the reason I wanted to sort of put this out here is because there really is no right or wrong. It really has to go back to that social significance. How do these behaviors impact the environment? You know, this spitting in excess of 600 times a day on the floor, this was actually a student I worked with, and running into oncoming traffic, that was a student I worked with too. Now it's like, so in that case, he didn't always run into oncoming traffic, but whenever he saw a bus, he would. So even though it wasn't that frequent, it was, the outcome was extremely dangerous. So we had to really, you know, deal with this behavior. You know, this was like the most socially significant because this child is going to lose his life. You know, whereas, you know, so I'm just sort of putting this out here to say the discussion was great and I really love the importance. Well, yeah, they talk to themselves, but how loud is it? How often? What if they have an office by themselves? Maybe they can talk to themselves all day. You know, so it was really, really great discussion. Any other questions or comments about this list? All right, moving right along. You guys did an excellent job sort of with triaging behaviors and talking about this. Oh, let's talk about stealing batteries from the office closet. I will admit, guilty. I've done it at least once or twice for my, you know, for the remote at home. But okay. All right, so, and then head banging on a soft pillow. So, you know,
But
maybe.
Wouldn't the other thing that we'd have to look at, and I know you're coming from a disability standpoint, and I'm just, you know, thinking in terms of my lawyer hat, not my soap making hat.
Sure, sure.
Wouldn't it depend upon if the person has a recognized disability and there has to be some kind of accommodation?
Well, the thing is, you know, with ADA and you know, I'm sorry?
Not the stealing batteries, but I'm thinking of
I know, it's just joking.
a soft pillow or something, which might be some kind of repetitive, you know, I don't know if it's, you know, what the diagnosis is, but.
Yes, absolutely. And certainly it could be that the soft pillow was sort of implemented as maybe it was something that they, you know, sort of brought into the workplace on their own as a self-calming thing. And again, the point of this slide is not to say what is right and what is wrong. It's really about the discussion about the importance of the social significance. And I appreciate your point very much about, you know, well, maybe this is simply an accommodation. And, you know, even, well, let's talk about the one that's spitting in excess of 600 times a day on the floor. Maybe this is an issue of a disability. And maybe, you know, instead of just saying, oh my God, that's disgusting, we can't work in this environment, maybe we need to, you know, maybe there's a medical condition, or maybe there's something that needs to be done. Maybe it's some sort of a Tourette's type of situation. And, you know, we can accommodate it with, you know, a wash rag. So just some great things to think about in relation to how we determine which behaviors are most important. The goals of ABA, of course, we just want to understand human behavior, use these principles, help people have better lives. All right, so the very core of applied behavior analysis is this ABC behavior chain. Everything in relation to ABA, whether it's the military strategist, whether it's changing Vladimir Putin's behavior, or it's changing the behavior of the employee that's coming late to work every day, or it's changing the behavior of the customer who is consistently rude to wait staff, or it's changing the behavior of, you know, whomever. It all starts with this very basic function, which is antecedent. What happens before behaviors occur? The behavior, the target of behavior, the behavior of interest, and the C, the consequence, what follows the behavior. So antecedent modifications are so vast. It could be the curriculum content or materials. It could be the physical look or environment of the physical environment in a building could be an antecedent. The setting, time of day, what's in the environment, the temperature, motivation, triggers, cravings, these were all considered antecedent modifications. And even prior experience can be an antecedent modification. So prior experience, you may say, well, how does that one really work out? Well, let's say that there is something, you're a community manager and you're trying to get members of the community to engage with a certain public service such as free webinars by SBDC. Well, part of sort of what could be contributing to their behavior of whether or not they show up is their prior experience. So can we even do some prepping? Antecedent modifications are just so vast, but we can just do so much vast manipulation of antecedents to help encourage those desired behaviors. And then consequent modifications. Well, there are a range of things, but I wanted to just keep it general. It can be things we say, things we give, certificates, hello. I mean, we couldn't have scripted it better. There was a behavior exhibited coming to the webinar, and a nice consequence would have been a tangible item, which was a certificate, which is perfectly fine. I also want to add, consequent modifications may also have to do with withholding of reinforcers. So sometimes we think of consequence, first of all, sometimes we think of consequences as negative. Consequences aren't necessarily negative. They're simply simply stimuli which follow behaviors. But we can also use consequent modifications by withholding the stimuli, withholding the tangible item, withholding the privilege. Now, let's look at this from a behavior analytic position. We had the antecedent, which was the advertisement of the webinar. We had the behavior of a person attending the webinar, and we have the consequence of no CEU certificate. If we were just sort of looking at this from a behavior analytic perspective, would we say that that person that was desiring a certificate is more likely or less likely to come back to the next one?
More likely.
You think they're more likely to come back? Okay.
If they got a certificate, yeah.
Yes,
but,
yes, absolutely. If they got a certificate, absolutely. So that's why it was really pretty perfect. And I don't know if any of you guys, we have some attorneys here or just different people in different professions, and we know how it is when it's time to get our continuing ed and our licenses are about to expire. It's all about that certificate. We like the content, we enjoy the training, but we want that certificate so we can upload it to the website and get get our license renewal. We're all seeking rewards, we're all seeking things, and we all do behaviors because we're seeking things to make our lives better. All right, I'm not going to take too long with this, but we're going to just talk about it briefly. Ideas that can get in the way of practicing good science, yet things that we do anyway. Something called a converse fallacy of accident. We exclude the data because we say, well, yes, it may work, but if everybody does it, it's going to be a madhouse. Just something called the converse fallacy of accident. Sometimes we do something called affirming the consequent. If P, then Q. Well, given P, we must have Q. So he gets a black eye when she hits him. He has a black eye because she hit him. No. Not exactly. Sometimes we have a fallacy of false cause. Just because there's a correlation doesn't mean there was a causation. I got sick after eating the sushi, therefore the sushi must have made me sick. Well, they followed each other temporally, but it didn't necessarily mean one caused the other. Sometimes we fall for things division. I think about like when we were kids growing up, Lucky Charms, part of a nutritious breakfast. Yeah, part of a nutritious breakfast, right? Like if you have add an apple or like some orange juice or something that's not, food colored marshmallows. But yeah, division, well, it's part of a nutritious breakfast, so it must also be nutritious. Not really. And then also famous endorsements, just different reasons that we're somehow tricked by things. Of course, we sometimes fall for superstitious behaviors and the placebo effect, which most people know about, which there's a ton of research indicating that our simple belief in something basically appears to have a therapeutic benefit. Now, unfortunately, this isn't, you know, it's not sciences, and it gets in the way of science, but just important for things to think about. And this is really my favorite one because I've seen it so much throughout life, the Concord effect. It's also what I like to call the wrong and strong. Everybody knows about the Concorde, famous plane. It's supposed to be so efficient and so amazing. And then they were halfway through, they're like, wait, this design is actually not very efficient at all. But we've put so much money and resources, we're gonna just go for it anyway. It's called the wrong and strong. The loss aversion. Well, I mean, I'm like, my God, I've been, you know, in this marriage for 20 years, you know, it's been a nightmare. I'm getting beat every day, but, you know, I'm, you know, not to be that extreme, but we see this playing out so much in our lives, Concord effect. And it really just defies logic. But this is why they're called a logical fallacy. It defies logic, but these are things we fall for. And it sort of gets in the way of meaningful behavior change because we're basically sort of willingly deluding ourselves. Okay. Scientific research, of course, it's objective, it's functional, it's experimental, it's objective versus subjective. Based on things we can observe, which is why we said thinking is not a behavior, because we can observe it. So objective data, it's like, I observed it. Yes, she picked up the telephone. She scratched her forehead. She blinked her eye. Versus subjective. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's like kind of sort of interpretation feelings. You know, we use subjective data all the time on a scale of 1 to 5. How good was this presentation? Well, I mean, it's useful a little bit, but it's not super useful because, well, what's a 1 to you might be a 3 to somebody else, and what's a 5 to you might be a 4 to somebody else. So what is better to say is that, you know, did you learn something at the end of this presentation that you didn't know before? Like that would be a nice objective way to collect data, you know, versus like, how good was this 1 to 5? So we're really talking about objective data. And, you know, in your businesses, if you have behaviors that you have certain desires to see, the hiring of more people with disabilities, the visibility of more people with disabilities in community spaces, the acceptance, well, these things, hiring, like that's very objective. Did it happen or did it not happen? But what about things like visibility? Well, that's a little subjective. So how do we then, you know, kind of make it not so subjective? We're going to talk about that in a minute. I wanted to just talk a little bit about how we do our work. In ABA, I want to say that it is a data-based science because it's not subjective at all. We're talking about things we can measure. We have a baseline condition. This is where we were before we started. And then we have a treatment condition. After we analyze the behavior, figured out the function, figured out what we need to do to tweak it, then this is what our result is. Now, this design is called an AB design. We often call it a teacher design, but it's really probably a design you guys as employers would be using most often. Okay, this is what it was. And then we tried our treatment and this is where it is now. So in this situation, yeah, they started praising the child when they were doing good and the amount of disruptive behavior decreased. It's observable, it's measurable, we know. Okay, we have a goal of increasing the number of persons with disabilities that get hired. And, you know, what we're doing is we're having these webinars, we're having this, you know, is there some sort of measurable effect on behavior? This is just sort of a random example, but now, even though this sort of seems to make sense, it's not like a very scientific model because we couldn't say for sure that just because we started praising, that's why the disruptive behavior went down. Or we can't say for sure that just because we've started these webinars and just because we've started doing this, that more people with disabilities are getting hired or that there's more visible positive influences. So we do what's called reversal design. We do a treatment, we implement it, and then we actually withdraw the treatment, which may seem a little kooky, but we withdraw it just for a little while so we can make sure that it was our intervention that made the difference. It certainly is not a perfect model for this type of work, but I just sort of wanted to show you how it's done. And of course, in the end, we want to end in the treatment condition because we just sort of need this data so we can say for sure, yes, it was our intervention. It was this powerful webinar series. It was these, wonderful meetings I've been having with employers. It was this great training that really made the difference. All right. And then what also might be nice in this setting is what we call multiple baseline design, which is tracking the behaviors across different people or areas. So we might want to track behaviors across different employers. So the organizers of this intervention, let's see, has this effort made a difference? Well, this is what it was before we started with employer A, with employer B, with employer C. Or the employer might say, okay, I have these employee behaviors I'm looking to change. I'm going to track it over this person, and this person. Or the business might say, okay, I have a goal to improve this type of customer behavior. So we're going to track it across this, or I'm going to track it at this restaurant and this restaurant and this restaurant. You can do multiple baselines across people, across settings, and across behaviors. All right. An alternating treatment design, it's basically just where you say, you know what, we're going to try two things at the same time and we're going to see which works best. These are all behavior analytic tools. Now, going back to what we were talking about, subjective versus objective data. We said, how do we, we have goals, like we want more visibility for people with disabilities, but what does that really look like? What does visibility look like? So in ABA, we have what's called topographical and operational definitions. It sounds a little weird, but because we need to observe it, because we need to measure it so we can count it and quantify it, we have to be very clear about what it is we're looking at. So for a behavior like kicking, we're going to say the lifting of one's leg, swinging it back behind the body, and then rapidly bringing it forward in contact with an object. We could say, or a person. Learning, the development of new behaviors. So what I'd like us to do, unmute your mics, and we're just going to have a little game of guess the behaviors. And then I want you guys to give me some nice topographical definitions for what we're going to call loyal customer behaviors and for what we're going to call reliable employee behaviors. Okay, so first part of the game, what is the behavior? From a sitting or standing position, a sudden drop to the ground onto the table or other nearby surfaces or onto the instructor. What is this behavior?
Tantrum.
Great. Nice job, Mary Jo. Yeah, because you can tell this was an example of when I was really working directly with kids. Yes, this is what we call like a tantrum or a flop. Mainly we would call this a flop when the child would just go limp. All right, great job with that. All right, so what is this behavior? Extending one or both open hands toward an object and closing his hands upon the object once contact is made, and bringing the object back towards his body in a rapid motion.
Catching a ball?
Good try.
Or just catching? I don't know.
Okay. Extending. Okay, let's see if catching fits. Extending one or both open hands toward an object, closing his hands upon the object once contact is made. Yeah, I think catching could fit. Does anybody have any other guesses? That was a great guess based on the definition.
Yeah, I was saying grabbing, like you're reaching out for something and grabbing it towards yourself, some candy that you want, something.
Yep. When I wrote it, I was thinking grabbing, but as I reread it, catching also fits. So great job, everybody. Now I want you guys to give me a topographical definition. What does it look like? Loyal customer behavior. Tell me what that looks like. So I can observe it and measure it and take data on it.
Buying several bars of soap several times a year.
Great. That's a great first start. Who else?
clicking on a link from an email sent.
Excellent. Observable, measurable. Great work. Loyal customer behavior. Okay.
Referring people to your store.
I was just thinking that. Okay. Referring other customers to the store. Very good. Okay. So now you're really really getting it. Things that you can observe and things that you can measure. That's why we said in the beginning, when we're talking about increasing the bottom line, we really need to think about who is doing the behaviors and what are the behaviors. So it sounds like these are not like customer behaviors. Okay. So when we're thinking about behavior change, we're thinking about coming up with a plan in which we're going to really get into the tools a little bit later, how we do it, which is based in science and tried and true. So great job with loyal customer behaviors. Let's talk about reliable employee behaviors.
Showing up to work on time every day.
Okay.
Greeting customers with a good morning or good afternoon.
Very good. So greeting customers, are we including making eye contact while greeting customers? Are we including smiling?
You can
That
count miles and you can count, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's very important, just that, the definition and the expectations clear, not only so that the person performing the behavior knows what the expectation is, but so that you can say, wow, is my training making a difference? So great. Anything else for reliable employee behaviors?
And I actually would qualify, I'm the one that said about showing up to work on time every day, unless the person has an excuse that's, gone through the right procedure to notify the employer. Because there's sometimes show up if your child is sick or, you have a flat tire. So it's not like you have to show up every day or else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just for the sake of argument and for our thoughts, let's go back to socially significant behavior. And I said, what may be socially significant to an employer might not be socially significant to an employee. The employee may say, okay, what's socially significant is that I get my work done. And if I can get my work done in 5 hours, why should I be at the office for 8 hours? So, it's an important discussion. So then you as an employer would have to ask yourself, well, what is really socially significant? Is it significant that my employee be here, or is it significant that the work get done even if they're not here on time? And that's really a discussion that you guys, just everyone has to have sort of with themselves, with their team, etc. Nice job with this, everyone. All right, now the favorite part, the tools, the magic. This is the toolkit. This is the box of tricks, the goodies, how we do this work. All right, so we're going to start by talking about something called pairing. And Chanel, if you can just help me, because I don't see a clock, so I have no idea. Oh, there's the time. Okay, so we're doing good on time. So perfect. Okay, yeah, I couldn't see the clock for a second. All right. So my favorite part, how we do our work. Let's talk about pairing. We already talked in the beginning about how Pavlov was able to basically make a dog salivate, have a physical response to something completely unrelated. And we're going to sort of talk about how it's done. So pairing is a behavioral trait. It's a tool in our tool bag that is so critically important. Basically, it's building rapport. But how do we build rapport? It's not building rapport between two people per se. In behavior analysis, pairing is building rapport between two stimuli. Taking something that is neutral, such as a bell, and making it positive by pairing it with something that's already positive. So the bell had no significance to the dog, nothing at all. But when the bell was continually paired with the food, the bell started to take on the properties of the food, so that the dog was just as happy to hear the bell as he was to have the food, which is a little bit nuts, but it happens all the time. It's called stimulus-stimulus pairing. And probably the best example, I can't think of a better one, the Marlboro Man. Okay. So I think if the cigarette companies had come out and just said, you know, here's a stick, light it on fire, you know, it's going to, it smells really bad, it's going to make you addicted, it's going to kill you, but, you know, your doctor. Okay, so, but what did they do? Well, we remember the old ads. Most doctors smoke Camels. Taking something that's neutral, actually, they really did a trick, because a cigarette wasn't even really neutral. It was like so obviously harmful. What? You want me to put this flaming stick in my mouth and do what? Suck it down the same place that I breathe my air? What are you talking about? But most doctors smoke Camels, you know, and the Marlboro Man. So now the cigarette, which was neutral and possibly harmful, because of stimulus pairing, now takes on the same qualities as the Marlboro Man. The cigarette is the man is the cigarette. They're interchangeable. So stimulus pairing. Does anybody know what these are and who this is?
Headphones, Dr. Dre.
Yeah, those are Beats by Dre. Those aren't just any headphones, those are Beats. And that is Dr. Dre. Okay.
The beat, Dr. Yeah.
Stimulus pairing. Now, Dr. Dre is not an engineer, right? I mean, like, well, he's a musical engineer, but like not like a science guy per se. So it's not like he's like, oh, well, let's use this wire and this copper and this, you know, we're going to make the perfect headphones. No, but he's somebody rich, he's somebody famous, he's somebody associated with music. So therefore, we're going to put him. Now, you may say, oh, well, this is just advertising, but what I'm sharing with you today is why this is advertising, why things like this are used, because there are behavioral principles behind it. Stimulus pairing. So now you've got the Beats by Dre, you're associated with Dre, you're in the know, you're down, down with the cause. It's everything. Now, what if the headphones were exactly the same quality, same technical precision, same beautiful crystal clear sound, but what if this was the spokesperson? What do you think the results would have been on sales?
Not quite as good.
Not quite as good. Now,
No, not a good quality.
And but the thing, especially given his his run-ins,
right,
it would
right.
not.
And even before his run-ins with the law, it's like Pee Wee Herman, I don't think so. But they're literally the same exact product.
But if I may, if you consider, I think in this particular example, I think you may have underplayed why Dr. Dre would be considered the person for this. Is not just because he's famous or because, he was just a music producer or whatever. You have to have a good ear, including things like knowing the right mix balance, things of that nature. So
Right.
There's a technical side of it that he would have that would make him be able to know how a sound should sound coming through your speakers. Noise cancellation, the mids,
Absolutely.
the balance, the mix. So
Yep.
if there was more of a technical side to him doing that, then it was just, he's a producer, because at the time Beats by Dre came out, West Coast rap was not even as popular. So if they were looking for somebody popular in the music industry, they would have looked at a Tip at the time, or a Southern rapper, or a New York rapper, because that's where rap was at that time.
That was
So it's more about his technical skills.
No, you're absolutely right. Who's speaking? Is that Chanel?
Sam, yeah.
Oh, Sam, are you a musician?
Something like that, retired.
Yeah, I can tell because just the everything you were talking about. So you're absolutely right.
I'm also an audiophile though.
I could tell because your answer was so precise. And so, yeah, it wasn't so much, and thank you. So, what I'll probably do is rethink this. I'll rethink this example. I've had that one for a long time, but no, you're absolutely right. So maybe what I could have done is, maybe put a different type of musician up. But the point being, it's really about the whole idea of stimulus pairing and how powerful it is. Now, I want to kind of go to a little darker place, but it's important and we need to. It's like considering myself and a colleague from New York are probably, well, we've been threatening to do it for like 2.5 years, but you know how life gets very busy. And I've really been wanting to write an article about how racism even is subject to these behavioral principles because of something which we know, which is called something like reflective condition motivating operation, a situation where a stimulus or material takes on an aversive quality and escape avoidance behaviors become reflective. The point I'm really trying to make about stimulus pairing is that it is so insidious. And I'm saying insidious now because I'm just thinking about sort of all the horrible ways that I see this scientific principle sort of being operated, all the ways that this principle is being used in such horrible ways around the world. And so this is why like marketing is so important, because what you can basically do, and this is a really serious discussion, but I will say that it's like, there's a reason that things are the way they are, the absence of people of color sort of from highlights in the media for so many years, the absence sort of visual images of people with disabilities, engaging in the workforce. What this basically serves to do is create a situation where stimuli are constantly being paired together. And I hope it's okay to talk about this because it is really important. And I think we're certainly in a climate where we can have these discussions. If all you ever sort of see as success is sort of male, Caucasian, able-bodied, this becomes the model for success. If you don't see people of color, women, people with disabilities, in these successful models, and then conversely, not only do you not see them, but you see the opposite. In popular media, you see a lot of images for years in the television, 3 years, not only just sort of not showing those models of successes, but showing the opposite. It creates sort of an unconscious association and an unconscious bias. And and this isn't so much simply to say about, excusing any kind of behavior. It's really just about to say about how insidious it is when we don't have good images, because it creates pathways. And I think a lot about that young Black man, literally his crime was walking at night in the projects. And, sort of him being a brown-skinned man in the projects at night, that was, became a stimulus, which basically, it basically creates a reflective situation. So this is really, really important for you to think about in your own personal lives, in any work that you do. Stimulus pairing is a scientific principle. Pavlov showed us that, okay? It's happening all around us. And so it is critically important when we think about things like marketing and advertising and imagery, that whether or not we believe it, whether or not we want to believe it, stimulus pairing is a thing. It is science. It's so powerful that it can make your body do a reflex that normally shouldn't happen under normal circumstances. Why should a dog start salivating just because somebody's ringing a bell? So I'm bringing this all up to say that we have to be very careful with how we do our work, because these principles are operating whether or not we care to believe it or not. So habits. We're talking a lot about behaviors. I want to talk a minute about habits. A habit basically is something where you've done the behavior so much it just becomes automatic. Habits are simply behaviors that have been repeated enough times with successful results. So it's almost like a reflex. And James Clear, author of a great book called Atomic Habits, the audiobook is on YouTube. He suggested that behaviors are neither good or bad, they're simply effective or ineffective. Clear, when he sort of is talking about developing habits, suggests that behaviors become habitual basically because of a cue, a craving, a response, and a reward. And let's just talk about this principle in a way which we can all understand. Your cell phone's on your nightstand, you hear a gring, gring. What's that?
Your phone?
Yeah. Well, I don't know what sounds your text makes, or so let's say you hear the buzz for the ding for a text. What do you do, or what happens next? And let's sort of slow it down a little. Okay, what happens next? Your cell phone's on your night table, you hear a bling, bling. What happens next?
You jumped up to answer it to see what's on the phone.
Okay, very good. It's excellent. Let's pause there and go back a little bit and just dissect it a little bit. Why do you jump up? Because actually you're jumping up as your response, but why? Why did you heard the ring ring, then you jumped up, but why?
Because the ding piqued my interest
Because
as the message.
you got it. Because the ding piqued your interest, the ding created a craving. I wonder who's calling me. I wonder who it could be. Then, so you had the cue, which triggered a craving. I wonder who's trying to contact me. Like, is it just Vitima telling me there's been a hurricane? Or is it something, or, an earthquake, or is it some interesting text from somebody I really want to hear from? Now we have the response that I jumped up, and then what's the reward?
See who is it? Is it interest?
You got it. And your reward is that you've gotten the information. Oh man, it's just another earthquake in Puerto Rico. Or no, it's such and such. Oh, so glad they texted me. So again, whether or not you realize it, you are all subject. Your employees are all subject. Your colleagues are all subject to this cue, craving, response, reward cycle. So how do we maximize this? The cue should be obvious. So if you're a business person and you're trying to create a cue in the environment, well, that's why we have these big golden arches in these colors, the red and the yellows, which are sort of colors symbolic of food. It's ketchup, it's mustard, okay? The cue should be obvious. The craving should be attractive. Okay, so is it a cue that, is it going to elicit something that is going to make me like feel good? Oh, something I want to go towards, or is it like the opposite would be something I want to run away from? Very important, the response should be easy. So this group wants people to come to more webinars. How do we make that response easy? Do we send out reminders right before the webinar in addition to the initial registration? How can we make the response easy? Because the easier it is, the more people are going to do it, and then the reward should be satisfying. Like information is nice, okay, but sometimes information and certificates are even better. So really good things for us to think about. Now, I'm going to kind of end here, and then we're going to just have some discussions. Principles of reinforcer effectiveness. No, I'm not quite going to end here. I'm sorry. Or I might based on time, but so we have rewards, but one of the things we know about the science is it's not just about having a reward, it has to be an effective reward. So how can we make our rewards most effective? So we have this acronym called DISC, and this helps us remember how can we make our rewards meaningful. Well, the first part is deprivation. I have talked about this so much with friends and the relationships and things like this. It's It's a scientific principle. So whether or not you believe it or not, like it or not, it still makes it true. The principle of deprivation is that no matter how much you like or value something, it becomes worth less if you always have access to it, which is kind of funny, but it's true. Anything we value will no matter what lose value if we're not deprived of it. We have to be deprived of it in order for it to remain valuable. It's like, you know, when you were a kid, you just were so happy when you got a few change, a couple bucks, you could buy some candy, right? But, you know, it's a funny joke. A guy was talking to a child at a candy store. He's like, when you grow up, you're going to have all the money in the world to buy all this, every bit of candy in the store, but you know what? You're not going to want it. And it's sort of a funny situation, but deprivation. I mean, I love Thai food, but if I ate it every day, it would just become less special. The next piece is immediacy. The reward needs to be delivered as closely following the behavior in order for it to have a strong impact. The S stands to do for size. It's got to be big enough to be worth it. It's got to be worth my time. And the contingent is really important too. And this is where we sometimes mess up. If I can get access to the reinforcer without doing the desired behavior, why would I ever do the desired behavior? All right, so I'm going to give you guys some examples, and I want you guys, remember this disc: deprivation, immediacy, size, and contingency. I'm going to give you guys some scenarios, and I want you to tell me which principles are violated. So Alicia kissed Jim on Monday. Jim was so happy. On Friday, he told Alicia, "Thanks, I really like you too." Which principle have we violated?
Immediacy.
Yeah. Everybody agree?
Yes,
All right.
agreed.
All right. Next one. Jenny loves Skittles. She would do anything for Skittles. She just finished eating a whole case of them. Her mother offered her a pack of Skittles if she cleaned her room, and she politely declined. So which principle have we violated?
Deprivation.
Provision?
Deprivation. Yeah, like, yes, normally Skittles work, but not if she's just had them. All right, Joe said he would mow his neighbor's lawn for a fee. After spending 2 hours mowing the lawn, his neighbor handed him a crisp $1 bill, and Joe never mowed the lawn again.
Size.
Size.
You got it. Wasn't worth it. Len trainees were told to have their assignments in by midnight on Tuesday. None of the trainees ever turned their assignments in on time. When the trainees had their midterm evaluation, everybody got a perfect score. So what principle have we violated?
Contingent.
You got it. If I can get access to the reinforcer without doing the work, remember, it's easy. It needs to be easy. You know, this is just how it is. All right, so we're running out of time, so I think we're gonna end with a discussion about reinforcement and extinction. Okay, so again, reinforcement is like, yes, it's that reward. Positive reinforcement, it's when we present something after a behavior. And when we're talking about positive reinforcement, it's when there's a behavior increase. And we don't reinforce people, we reinforce behaviors. All right, let's just have a few examples. Mom gives Tommy a dessert for eating his spinach. Tommy begins to eat his spinach more often. Is dessert functioning as a reinforcer for eating spinach?
Yes.
Yes.
It absolutely is. All right. Mom gives Tommy ice cream every time he finishes eating all of his spinach. His rate of finishing his spinach does not increase. Is ice cream functioning as a reinforcer?
No.
Nope, you got it. So the thing is, a reinforcer isn't what you think is good. A reinforcer isn't what I think is good. A reinforcer isn't even what the kid or the client or the employee thinks is good. A reinforcer is something which when we deliver it, the behavior that happened right before it goes up. Mom smacks Johnny every time he curses at the dinner table. Johnny's cursing increases. Is smacking a reinforcer for cursing behavior?
She ain't smacking him hard enough.
Yes.
The negative reinforcement.
Yeah. Actually, well, I'm glad you guys got this right. Yes, because it's a reinforcer, which means it's strengthening it. Reinforcers strengthen behaviors. It doesn't matter that mom thinks she's smacking. It doesn't matter that mom thinks she's yelling. It doesn't matter that mom thinks this hurts. If the behavior is increasing, then what she is inadvertently doing, or he is inadvertently doing, is reinforcing that behavior, strengthening it. Because if you present a stimulus following a behavior and the behavior goes up, that's called a reinforcer. Mommy gives Johnny $100 every time he goes through dinner using nice language. The rate of Johnny's using nice language stays the same. Is the $100 functioning as a reinforcer?
Yes, because if he were normally to use bad language, and it's influencing his behavior, I'd say yes.
Okay, but what did we say that reinforcers do to behaviors?
It increases. Oh, I'm sorry, it didn't increase. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I missed
Okay,
that.
no problem, but good analysis anyway. So no, in this case, the $100 was not acting as a reinforcer. Quick discussion, then we're just going to talk about extinction, and then we're going to wrap up. There are two main types of reinforcers. There are primary reinforcers. These are things we were born valuing. Things to eat, sensory input, like sensitivity to heat, cold, soft touch, need for water, sexual stimulation once puberty has been reached. Would you believe that everything else in the world that we like and that we value is what we call a conditioned reinforcer? Something that we have been conditioned to value only because it has been linked back to one or more of these primary reinforcers. Diamonds, it's just a shiny rock, right? But so just things to think about. I love behavioral science because it just really sort of puts everything into perspective. Reinforcers do not have to be tangible. They can be privileges, activities, etc. All right. We're going to end with a discussion on extinction, and then we'll just open it up for questions. And if anybody has any sort of specific things that they'd like to discuss, we can chat about it. Okay. Extinction is a tool we use, and again, a very powerful tool in our toolkit. When we're using extinction, we said, okay, the event that follows a behavior is stopped and the rate of a behavior decreases. So all of a sudden, mom's like, wait a minute, even though I'm smacking him every time he curses, he's cursing more. I wonder what happens if I stop smacking him. And the smacking stops, and then the behavior goes down. In that case, we're using extinction. Basically, when we're using extinction, we figure out what is feeding a behavior, and then we starve the behavior of that thing. That is extinction. Okay, Tommy burps at the dinner table. Mom yells, "That's disgusting." Tom's burping increases. Is extinction being used here?
No.
No, what? Good job, reinforcement. No, she's not using extinction. She's every time she says, "That's disgusting," but he's doing it more. So she's strengthening it, even though she's not meaning to. Tommy burps at the dinner table. Mom realized her attention to Tommy's burping was acting as a reinforcer. So she decides to ignore the behavior, and Tommy's rate of burping is decreased. Is this extinction?
Yes.
You got it. Chanel, can you share that quick video, and then we'll just end with that and some questions. Thank you, guys.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna say stop share. Okay. Do you guys have volume? Chanel, I don't think we can hear volume.
Okay, 1 second.
Okay.
Okay, now we should be good to go. I'll start from the beginning.
Yeah, Chanel, I think you can stop it. I think they get the gist. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I love that video so much. It's really just a perfect example. Now, somebody said, boy, that's one rotten kid, but I would say, no, that's just a kid that learned that when he wants something, this is the behavior he does to get it. And certainly, he was pretty effective. He probably wanted his parents' attention, and he learned, okay, so when I need my parents' attention, I need to do this behavior. And then his parents finally got hip to it, and they decided to put it on extinction. All right, questions, comments. There's so many other principles and tools associated with this. As I said, these are behavioral principles that kind of guide so much of what we do in work and life and things like this. And we've got, how are we doing on time? I think we've got 6 minutes. So you're welcome, Dr. Gibson. You're welcome. Thank you for coming. So if anyone would like to chat, or you have an issue or something that's going on in your workplace, and maybe we as a group can help you brainstorm a solution based on some things we've learned today. Would anyone like to share a problem or a challenge and have the group try to help them out with a solution? You can anonymize things. Say, hypothetically, I have this employee, or we'll keep it anonymous. Any other questions, comments? I see.
Hi, my name is.
Okay, go
Hello.
ahead. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Delima Bell. I'm a customer service consultant, and I think one of the things that came up this week that I heard you touched on a little bit. You talk about behavior, and I wanted to hear you talk more about expectations. I think you touched a little bit about expectations, but what I didn't hear you talk about was accountability. I think I heard you talk about expectation, but one of the things that I find challenging in the client that I'm working with was they did not set expectations and they did not hold their employees accountable. So that was a big issue with the program, the project that I was working on. So how do you feel about that?
Well, when I hear about like expectations, you know, one of the first things we have to do when we sort of have that target behavior, you know, we talked about topographically defining it. What does it look like so I can observe it? So it sounds like there wasn't a clear expectation. We didn't have that clear topographical definition of what it is I'm looking for and what this looks like. But what it also sounds like you also have to make sure that the person you're asking to do the behavior has the ability to perform it. And in which case, if they don't have the ability, then you have to train them. So you have to first define what you're looking for, which it sounds like they didn't. And then they need to make sure, well, does this staff person have it in their repertoire? I mean, can they physically make a smile? Maybe they can't. Maybe there's something wrong with their mouth. I mean, you don't know. But once you've ascertained that the person physically has the ability to perform a task, then it's about getting them to do it. But if they don't have the ability, it's about training. So I would say in that situation, it has to be, what are the target behaviors? What are those behaviors of interest? What are behaviors for increase? What are behaviors for decrease? I saw a question in the chart about how do we deal with a new business and to use these principles to get customer engagement. And Susie Sanford, I'm just going to put it right back on you. It really needs to go back to what is your personal definition of customer engagement. If customer engagement means for you that you have a Facebook page and people are commenting on it, okay? Then that's one thing. If customer engagement means that you have a physical store and people physically come to your store, that's another thing. Well, I'd say, let's say you have a physical place. Let's go back to the primary reinforcers. Let's go back to the things nobody has to teach us to like or value. Food, free, make it easy, make a cue the environment. There's a smell of beautiful cinnamon muffins coming through your store. It's going to create a craving. I'm hungry. I'd like to taste those cinnamon muffins. It's going to create a response, which is going to bring them to your store. And then the reward is they get it. And then your reward is that you've now had customer engagement. So it's really about really taking some time and saying, what are the customer behaviors that I want to see? What does customer engagement look like to me? And then, it can look like very many things based on everything we've talked about. I hope that helped.
That was great.
And Chanel, please just help me with the comments section.
Yes, so nothing right now on Facebook, but definitely coming in on the chat. We've got great presentation tonight, along with the great insights and lessons. So thank you, Dr. Mills. Sure. In addition, wow, very inspiring. Very inspiring. I've learned a lot. Thank you so much. There is a question that just came in. How can some of these principles be applied in social media to increase engagement and brand recognition?
Well, I will tell you this personally and use a personal example. And some of you guys that are on St. Croix paying it forward, don't tell anybody. So I started a webpage. I had a need. I had a very scary hurricane. My partner was living in New York. I was here in the Virgin Islands by myself. I had no generator. I was struggling to the max. And I decided I need some help and I need support. So I started a Facebook page called St. Croix Paying It Forward. So I'm going to give you a very specific example. I was like, if I need support, maybe somebody else needs support. Maybe we can all support each other. And guess what I started doing? I started having contests, giving away things for free. Our first 500 member milestone, there was like a cash prize. And then like it caught on and it was fun. And it was like a little project that was fun. And then like people in the community were like, hey, I'm going to donate money. So then I had like more money to give prizes. I was actually using behavioral principles to build St. Croix Paying It Forward to engage people. So I'm happy to sort of share more about all of that. And Chanel can share my email address. So I'm happy to just chat offline, give you more ideas. Yep. But tons of social media ideas, tons. Freebies, contests, puzzles. One time we had a haiku contest. That was really fun. St. Croix Paying It Forward. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, it doesn't look like there. Oh, one more question just came in. What do you enjoy most about what you do?
Well, I will say I do a lot in my role as ED of VIU said, but what I enjoy most, I love sharing about ABA. So thank you guys for this opportunity. I love so many aspects of my work. I personally really enjoy the training. And I also like policy. I like when I can sort of read something and give my opinion. And I like being an advocate. I like standing up for the underdog. And I like making a difference. And I like coming into work late. You're welcome.
This is Mary Jo. I just have an observation.
Sure.
Addie Otley just passed,
Mhm.
but he engendered a lot of customer engagement with the birthday call-ins and the mystery questions. So people were always calling his show, trying to get in, even though, you know, sometimes there were so many people calling, you couldn't get in. But that was one way of getting that engagement.
And guess what? Deprivation, because he was like making himself scarce because like you couldn't always get there. So all of that was very good stuff. Behavioral principles. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. Holler at me. Get my contact information from Chanel if you'd like to be in touch. If you maybe like this presentation repeated or one customized for your group, we can do that at VIU Said. So just be in touch.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mills. Thank you as well, of course, to our business and disability partners who have joined us, and absolutely to the participants, so engaging, as well as those who are able to join us on Facebook. And already it's been asked, where can we get this recording? So all you have to do is visit www.usbieda.org/webinars. And by the end of the week, the recording will be up and ready for you to view. And as Dr. Mills mentioned, I did place her email address in the chat. And so you can always get it from there before we close out. And again, we want to thank everyone for joining us today at Wednesday webinars with the Virgin Islands Economic Development Authority. My name is Chanel Peterson. I'm the Managing Director for Marketing and Vision 2040. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. And good night.
Good night.
Bye, everybody. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Hi, good night. Thank you very much.
Good night.